Whiskey review number 50. It may be a small milestone, but nevertheless, I wanted to mark it with something a bit special. Hey guys, and welcome to my channel. My name is Ben, the Whisky Geek, and today I've got a fairly special sample of whiskey that I've been sent by an old patron before I went dormant. Joe Jackson was very kind to share this really rather interesting Ardbeg with me. Now this is Ardbeg Supernova 2019. This is a whiskey that was expensive at the retail price, but very quickly got snapped up by Ardbeg collectors and is now extremely expensive. It started at £140 and it's now about £450 if you were to get it on from retailers or on auction sites. So this is a very, very generous sample. I couldn't quite believe it when this arrived from Joe, so thank you very much, Joe. This is something that I was kind of saving to mark an occasion, and although 50 episodes, 50 reviews is not a big milestone by a lot of people's standards, by a lot of channel standards, it was something that for a period of time I didn't think I was ever going to get to. So it is an achievement for me, myself, personally, to be back and to be getting stuck in. I'm really thoroughly enjoying cordoning off the time and sitting down and focusing on the whiskey and making a little session of it is a level of appreciation of whiskey that I sorely missed over the 2-ish years that I was gone. So I've got something excellent to drink to mark the occasion. Oh my days, that smell already just billowing out, filling the air. The Ardbeg Supernova series of whiskies is really quite an interesting series, but there is quite a lot of misconceptions around what it is and what the idea behind it is. A lot of that stems from back in 2014 or just before 2014, Louis Vuitton Moët Hennessy, the company which owns Ardbeg and Glenmorangie and a bunch of premium designer brands and products, they did a bunch of experiments, one of which was to send some samples of whiskey up into space. It was just samples, it wasn't a whole cask. The cost of fuel to get a 250 litre, 500 litre barrel up into space would be absolutely horrendous. It would make this release seem cheap by comparison. So it was just some samples, but it was a PR stunt and it got thrown around that Ardbeg was being aged in space and this, that and the other. Tie into that this is called Supernova and it's all themed around space and UFOs and that kind of stuff. They kind of played into that PR stunt and led people down the road of believing this was whiskey aged in space, but it's not. The idea behind the Supernova series is for them to push the limit on how much you can peat malt before you make whiskey from it. So it's trying to make the most heavily peated whiskey they could. Another one of the tests that they did was to see how heavily you could peat malt before making whiskey from it, and kind of the extent to which you could peat before it became arbitrary, before it became just surface dust that got washed off. They managed to push it, I think it was about 110 to 120 ppm. This is 100 ppm, and a lot of people know that Octomore will quote anything from 100 to 150 parts per million. So that's the phenolic content of the malt. So how much smoky, earthy, those kind of flavours, how many parts per million there are of those flavours. Not all of that makes it from the malt to the whiskey in the glass. It gets filtered out when you mill it, when you mash it, when you ferment it, when you distill it, when you age it. So aging in particular, one thing that they do, Octomore do it as well, to emphasise how much peat influence you get, is release it quite young. This is quite a young whiskey. Put it in the context of the price, lots of people balk at that and go, I'm not getting a good deal here. But this is young, so heavily peat influenced, less so on the cask influence, heavily peated, 100 ppm, and its cask strength, 53.8%. Unchill filtered, naturally coloured, good stuff. You know, a whiskey's caught my attention when I've got multiple sheets of notes and they're covered in little scribbles and things. So, for context, normal Ardbeg peated to about 50 to 55 parts per million, and this, even with the cap on, it's so richly peated that it's escaping, it's lingering in the air, and I can still pick it up over here. Taking a look at this nice natural colour here, it's really quite a crisp, clear gold. It's about shade 7, ice fine. So let's go in and take a sniff. There's a thick wave of tar right from the onset. It's quite spirity, it could be a bit of youth, it could be the high ABV. There's some nice citrus elements, orange, a little tanniny pith, and some wholesome kind of cocoa beans. Savoury elements, but it's this thick peat laying over everything. It's like a heavy cloud over everything. Really at the forefront, it's not a background peat by any means. There's salted caramel, quite savoury, almost like Marmite yeast extract. Salty sea breeze. And there's kind of a menthol-like astringency, kind of like a pine wood freshener. There's a deep earthy note and some smouldering fire, smouldering ashes. Honeyed ham. Vanilla. A gentle licorice and a herbal note. It's like for every deep, dark, heavy, peated element, there is a sweet note, a little complexity, bright and fresh, to kind of balance it, to explore. That is a wonderfully deep, rich, heavy, peated experience. I know I'm going to annoy some people saying this, but I'm getting much more fulfillment, much more engagement from this than I have any Octomore I've tried. I think I've tried 5 or 6 different expressions so far, but this is in a different league. Let's see how all of that carries over onto the palate. That's an interesting development. Wow. So it starts off initially very sweet and bright. There's caramel, vanilla, meringue, and then there's this torrid wave, sudden aggressive peat that just comes in, and it's just as you've kind of overcome the surprise of, oh, actually this is really light and bright, and then it just overwhelms your mouth, overwhelms your palate. There is quite a prominent alcohol prickle. Again, I think there's some youth showing there, but it's this savoury smokiness, salinity, and that unmistakably Ardbeg minerality, that quality I believe comes from the little purifier they have on their spirit still. There's a lot of dry wood as it sits and some chili flakes coming in. And then as I've had it here in the glass and I've been exploring it, there's kind of a peanut brittle developing. It's quite interesting. It's more of those tannins, savoury elements coming together. Through into that finish, it's this alcohol prickle that's bubbling along, chili flakes, but it's super drying. It's like almost dehydrated wood. There's coffee beans, there's citrus elements, more of that. There's licorice, herbal, salted meats, and the peat is present, but after the palate it feels like respite. It feels like it's mellowing out and letting you take a break from those heavy earthy tones. And then revisiting the nose, digging back into the nose, you're getting like lemon sherbet and more of those citrus and sugary sweet elements coming. So this is really quite a special whiskey. This is an experience. If I had spent 140 quid on a bottle of this, I absolutely would not have been disappointed. I would sip it slowly and I'd savour it and draw it out, but I wouldn't regret the purchase. This has got to be my favourite special release, limited release Ardbeg that I've tried to date. I've rated it a 94% out of 100, which for me is really quite a strong score. I've got to profess to be more of a Port Charlotte or a Bruichladdich fan than I am an Ardbeg fan, but, and I know this is going to irritate some people, I am finding this to be way more engaging and exciting than any Octomore I've tried to date. I think there's a couple of things that's helping them there, but the fact that they are using Islay peat to peat their malt rather than Highland peat like Bruichladdich or Octomore do is really, it's helping to fulfill on that promise of a heavily peated experience to me. It's helping to fulfill all the marketing hype, because this is not just heavily peated, it's Islay peat, which is a special subset of peat, a special flavour profile, I guess. You never know, this could be super dangerous and be my little gateway drug into appreciating Octomore the way that other people do. It could be just that I haven't clicked with it the way that I'm supposed to have yet, and this has opened that world to me, that very expensive world. So thank you, Joe, for this really special sample. It's really, really appreciated. And thank you all for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. If you have, please do like, comment and subscribe. Feed the YouTube algorithm, and I hope to see you in the next ones. Cheers. I think I'll follow that up with a bit of the Oogie. Wow, going from the Supernova to the Uigeadail, that seems super lightly peated. It's like mega fruity.